Here's a muscle building tip. Don't try to move the weights. Rather, focus on challenging the muscle. This was actually told to us by a good friend, Ben Pekulski. Very smart guy, bodybuilder, knows what he's talking about. And I agree. I think that's a very good tactic when it comes to...
I love that piece of advice, but you have to break that down a little bit. Like, what does that mean, and why is that important for certain people that are focused? What's the difference? Why are people that are focused, and I think this tip comes from somebody who's really focused on trying to sculpt the body, build muscle. That's their
bodybuilders are experts at this, right? Now, this doesn't mean that trying to just move the weight doesn't also build muscle. It does. Getting stronger generally does help build muscle. But this is really, really muscle building focused. Bodybuilders are excellent at this, where they'll take a weight, and let's say it's a weight they could do 20 reps with. They'll be able to get 10 reps with that weight and make it feel like that 10 reps is extremely intense, just by focusing and concentrating on the target muscles, the squeeze and the stretch. And you can do this. And what's cool about this, especially as you become more advanced, is that it lowers the risk of resistance training, right? So rather than continuing to add weight, at some point, it's probably smarter to try to make the weight feel heavier. And your body really doesn't know the difference if you do this the right way.
Well, it also makes a huge difference when you're trying to sculpt a physique and you're working on specific body parts, right? So if I get a client to understand that, and let's say a client comes to me and they really want to develop their chest.
Yeah.
And that's a primary focus. And maybe they have great delts already and great arms already, and it's just like that, man, I have this lagging chest and I really want to focus on that. This is where this piece of information becomes really valuable, especially when performing a movement like a bench press, which is a compound lift that you've got shoulders and triceps, you've got all these other muscles that are involved in that movement. And if for most of your life you were just trying to get stronger and lift more weight, well, then your body's going to move in a manner in order to just get that weight up, whether that be using momentum or you using all your other secondary muscles to help it out. And you see this sometimes. Sometimes I used to be able to see it in a guy who I would see bench presses really well, and then he had these massive delts and triceps, but then he had kind of a weak-looking chest. Yeah. Like that right away to me is a red flag that when that guy lifts, he's just trying to get that weight up as much as he can, and he's allowing those secondary muscles to take over a lot of the movement instead of thinking about the muscle we're trying to develop in that exercise and trying to make it challenging for the chest. And what that requires you to do many times, and why it's hard for people, is to lower the weight, is to drop the weight down.
And then make it feel heavy and target that muscle.
That's right. And focus on squeezing that muscle and fatiguing that muscle during the movement versus, I know I can do another 25 pounds. Yeah, the problem is when you start getting up to closer to your max load, it's harder to stay focused on a specific muscle. Instead, the body just wants to get the weight up. And so I love that piece of
Totally.
advice.
I mean, if let's say you're trying to build your glutes and your squat weight continues to go up, your glutes really aren't developing, but your quads continue to develop. You don't want to keep adding weight, because what you're doing is you're going to continue to use this, whatever this recruitment pattern is that you've developed. That's effective. It's effective at lifting heavy weight, but it's not developing the muscles that you really want. And like you said, you lower the weight, change your technique, change the feel, focus on what the glutes do during the squat. Well, the glutes are hip extension. What does that feel like? How can I squeeze the glutes? How can I make this more of a glute exercise? And that often means you have to go lighter. Usually, I'd say 99% of the time, it means you go lighter, but then make the weight feel heavier. And bodybuilders are so good at this. They're so good. When you watch a really good bodybuilder train, that's what they're doing. And oftentimes, people look at bodybuilders, really experienced ones, and they go, that guy's 260 pounds and he's benching like 200 pounds. Like, how does that make sense? He must be really weak. Well, no, he's just really good and making 200 pounds.
He's real good at that mind-muscle connection.
Totally.
Yeah, like the whole time under tension is a completely different mindset. And it's something it's cool that we have the ability to completely shift the variable and make something more challenging by just, like focusing more exclusively on which muscles can I feel firing off more, and how can I really, get even like more hyper focus in that direction versus just moving weight and trying to get through the exercise. Can I really grind my way through this and intensify it further? And it's a cool thing that we have the ability to do that in contrast to just, really just focusing on getting through the movement.
Now, in a perfect world, to the point, Sal, you were also making, is you have the ability to do both.
Yes.
Yep. Right? So in a perfect world. Now, what ends up happening for most people is you tend to be one or the other. And I'm going to use Justin and I as an example, because I think in our 20s when we were lifting together, We're perfect
We're
examples
completely different.
of being the polar opposite here. I was the bodybuilder guy who was moving the lighter weight, really, really good at the mind muscle. Justin was incredibly good at organizing his entire body to move more weight. So he was much stronger than I was on things like the bench press. But the way we moved the weight was so different. And what you tend to do is, or what a lot of clients do, is, especially this is even experienced lifters that have been lifting for 5, 6, 10 years, is they stick to a way of lifting always. If you identified more as the bodybuilder guy, like me, you always kind of lifted that way. And I never lifted like a strongman. I never tried to do a squat or a bench press and just move as much weight. I always moved it like a bodybuilder. And someone like Justin would probably admit that for most of his career, he just tried to move it like an athlete. Just move as much weight as possible, never really moved it like a bodybuilder. But there's tremendous value in making that crossover and learning how to do both, and then actually integrating that into your programming depending on what you're doing.
What I noticed with that was just how to make those micro adjustments, because I was more connected to muscles that were involved in the lift, where if there's any kind of a shift, any lateral shift, any kind of twisting, whatever, I could correct and actually get connected to the muscles that will help stabilize and make my lift more effective and efficient in that vertical line. So at least from a technical perspective, like being able to have access and control of your muscles more, I feel like that really helped enhance that.
Yeah, the value, there's value in each, right? The value in learning how to move more weight is you become very efficient with your movement. You can transfer your strength in a real way. You've got really good functional carryover to the real world, because when you're lifting a couch, moving something, you're wrestling with your kids or whatever, you're not thinking biceps, triceps, shoulders, that, you're just moving, right? So there's lots of carryover, right? Now, what's the value in connecting to muscles? Well, you can develop target muscles. You can avoid imbalances. The risk factor for injury is real low. Like, here's one thing that I'll say all day long, and people can try arguing this, but it's totally true. Forget everything else I just said. The person who trains to feel muscles, they've got incredible longevity with their training. You see guys like this train 70s, 80s, 90s, never really hurt themselves, always develop a nice looking physique, and they have a low risk of injury because they're really focused on feeling the muscle. Whereas the person
less
that's
crazy damaging on the joints.
Yes, the person trying to move as much weight as possible, it's a higher risk, right? So there's that, right? But then there's not the carryover of the functionality. But it is funny when I would train a athlete in the gym versus when I would train somebody who's always done bodybuilding. Like, you ever try to get a bodybuilder style of person or whatever? You ever get them to try and do like a kettlebell swing? Or a clean with a barbell,
like a squat shoulder raise.
It's so so weird, right? It's like you could tell that their muscles are working like one after another after another.
It's all segmented,
yeah. Or you try to get like an athlete to row in a way to where we're going to get the rhomboids, or let's get the lats really involved, or slow down your pull up or your curls. Let's really focus on this, this squeeze here. Yes, right. So it is really like, remember when we all worked out with Ben Pekulski? He's obviously, this guy's like. He's bodybuilder extraordinaire. He's an expert on mind-muscle connection, okay? And it was funny because we all worked out with him, and it was the three of us, and Ben's kind of taking us through a workout. It was really fun, but he kept going back to Justin and changing his floor.
He's just like, it just irritated him, I'm like, I'm sorry, Ben, I'm just not liking it. But it was difficult for me to get in that mindset, because it's just, again, that's a totally different skill that obviously he's mastered at the highest level.
Yeah, but what I appreciate about you admitting that and talking about that is, look how advanced of a lifter you are and experienced, and you have the knowledge to understand the value of both, but then also that just highlights how much we all tend to gravitate towards a way of training. And there's so much value in learning to be both of these guys, learning how to switch that mindset over. I'm going to train a while like a bodybuilder. I'm going to move the weight where I'm not thinking about moving the weight. I'm thinking about challenging the muscle. And that's how I'm going to train. And that, so for the listeners that own several of our programs and stuff, this is really the difference of how you lift when you're following MAPS Powerlift versus how you lift when you're following MAPS Aesthetic.
Yeah.
If you are following MAPS Powerlift, your mind shifts over into being like someone who's trying to move as much weight.
It's not chest day on MAPS Powerlift.
That's right.
It's bench press day.
Exactly. And that's what you want to be thinking. Like, when you're working in our MAPS Aesthetic or our MAPS Split program, which is more bodybuilder focused, you're trying to challenge the muscle. And so when you choose your weights for those programs, you should have that thought process in mind when you're going
through it.
Totally.
For me, it's when I do the the low rep sets. So like fewer exercises, higher sets, and lower reps. In other words, instead of doing like 3 exercises for shoulders, and my rep range being 10 to 15, I'm doing like 1. So it's all overhead press, and I'm doing like sets of 2 reps or 3 reps. When I'm doing the low reps like that, I am not focusing on feeling the shoulders. It's all about moving the weight. It's all about maximizing movement efficiency. When I go into 10, 12, 15, especially 15 plus reps, it's not about movement efficiency for me, at least. That's when I'm really trying to focus and squeeze the muscle. Now, I, in the past, would tend to move towards more movement than muscle because I'm almost in the middle with what I appreciate, but I lean more towards strength. I think I enjoy that a little more. As I've gotten older, though, I've appreciated more of feeling the muscle. Why? It's lower risk.
Yeah.
It just is. Like, I'm 43 now. I've been working out for a long time. You know, consistently pulling and pushing super heavy weight all the time, I start to feel it in my joints.
And because of that advice, I'm going to challenge what you just said because I do agree, though. I think what you just said is very good general advice for somebody. When you're moving in the lower rep range, like that, general good advice. But that being said, to the point you just made right now, as you get older, you start to realize, like, man, just trying to move heavy weight sometimes. Boy, that's when my joint. So there's a lot of value in even doing low reps, but thinking like a bodybuilder. Sometimes.
You're right. That just takes so much more skill
and discipline to lower their weight.
Yes.
Because a guy like you knows he can get onto the bar right now and squat 450, and you want to move, and you're like, today's a heavy day. I'm moving triples,
or I could do 2 really controlled slow reps,
225 or 275, and you don't want to do that because it gets your ego messes with you a little bit. But yet there's a ton of value, and you actually. And by the way, because the muscle doesn't recognize it's 275 or 4050. It recognizes the intensity that you're taking towards it.
Right.
You can bring that same 450-pound intensity with 275. So that is in a sense, I think, still valuable to train that way sometimes. I think the biggest key takeaway for most of the listeners is understanding that whether you believe it or not, you probably identify with one group more than the other, and learning to move into the other mindset and learn how to do that, train that way, I think will provide you tremendous value.
Here's a little trainer trick that I used to do all the time, or trainer hack. If I got a client and their goal was change the way I look, that was the main goal, change my aesthetics, my composition, and I looked at their old workouts, I'd just do the opposite. So, and this usually looked like, for female clients, focusing on just moving the weight, because they usually didn't do it that way. And it would blow their minds on how much their bodies change. Or if they always trained that way, I was an athlete, I like to do athletic type workouts. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do some bodybuilding for 2 or 3 months. And it was just a trainer trick because I could show them in 2 or 3 months dramatic changes in their body. So the value is there. There's value in both. I definitely think everybody should do both.